The British government and the media are lying about yesterday's Yom Kippur terror attack at a synagogue in Manchester, and trying to pretend this has absolutely nothing to do with Islam when its motivations are found in its scriptures in both the Quran and the Hadiths, and also that it is completely disconnected from the immigration policies that this current Labour government supported while out of government and are continuing to practice while in government, making it more likely to happen again. These people have enabled and emboldened terrorists by the rhetoric that they have spewed about the not just Israel-Palestine conflict, but the idea that Islam itself is compatible with and belongs in Britain, and that these people are just as indistinguishably English as you and me. They're not. Islam does not belong here, and every second it is in our country, it continues to present an existential risk to we, the indigenous Brits, and of course to the Jewish people that they have targeted yesterday. And before I begin, there are going to be comments by people who are unfamiliar with my work, unfamiliar with my writing on the Islamic Network in the Home Office, the grooming gang scandal, the repeated terror attacks that have happened in my country, and they are going to say, you only care about this because it's Jews. No. Go and check the history of my work. And if I might remind people, it is absolutely tragic this has happened to innocent Jews. Jews have Israel who can keep them safe. However, if all the Jews left Britain tomorrow, including my Jewish friends, which I would not like to happen, I do not have an Israel to go to. These terrorists are still in my country, and so you do not have to make Israel your priority. You do not even have to like Israel to want all of these people to be deported, to want them discouraged from staying here, to want Islam to be removed from Britain entirely, to keep us and our families safe. So, for the details of the attack, I'll turn quickly to the BBC's reporting on this because it has a lot of images here. 2 Jewish people have died and 4 remain in hospital at time of recording after suspect, who has been shot dead by the police, Jihad Al-Shamie, a 35-year-old who is a British citizen but is of Syrian descent, who was born in Syria and given citizenship in this country. Why? Because our pathologically permissive asylum system gives citizenship grants to people who are, repeatedly it seems, most likely to be terrorists. I mean, we only need to think of the Manchester Unabomber's family, the Abaidis, who came over from Libya because they were themselves jihadists who had a dispute with Colonel Gaddafi and who raised their sons to be jihadists, who then spent their housing and income benefits on building a nail bomb that killed and injured 22 people at the Ariana Grande pop concert. And then the government told us don't look back in anger. I think it's time that we start looking back in anger and start blaming the appropriate culprits. Don't you? I think this should be the last terror attack that happens on Britain's soil. It probably won't be, given the government's response, but I think it should be the last one. So this happened at the Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation Synagogue on Middleton Road in Manchester, and don't worry, we'll be hearing just how diverse and peaceful that area usually is by the typical propagandists later. There was a eyewitness here, Shah, who told the BBC that she just saw a man rushing past and driving straight for the members of the synagogue. She saw him jump out of the car, run towards the people, running out with a knife and going on a bit of a rampage. It was quite terrifying, to be completely honest. Yeah, of course. So this is the building there. He was shot dead in the courtyard by police out in front of the synagogue. The sort of running order of the attack was the car was driven at people gathering outside the synagogue for Yom Kippur. The driver then got out, stabbed at people with a knife. He was stopped from entering the synagogue by the people inside who barricaded themselves in, and he was shot dead by police because he apparently had a bomb strapped to him. The police also tragically seem to have shot one of the victims, so there will probably be an inquiry here. This is an announcement by Greater Manchester Police that says that during an autopsy, one of the victims suffered a wound consistent with a gunshot injury, so it could have been caught in the crossfire, could have gone through the door. We're not sure at this time, but we'll find out more about this. Here's the perpetrator. Wonder why he did that. Wonder if we had any clues whatsoever as to his motivation. It looks like that there's either Mach C4 or actual explosives on him. Again, his name is Jihad Al-Shamie. He's not exactly hiding his motivation, is he? But won't stop people in the media and the government from playing dumb as to why he has done this. There's also another more updated photo here. Why is this man in my country? Well, the BBC has some answers. So he came over and as a child, and was given British citizenship in 2006 when he was around the age of 16. We say around the age of 16 because, of course, all of these asylum seekers never actually subject themselves to age verification measures, and it's against their human rights to actually be screened for this. The worst example was the Afghan who stabbed aspiring Marine Thomas Roberts to death. He came over, claimed to be a child, was actually on the run from Interpol after having shot 2 other asylum seekers, fake asylum seekers, illegal migrants, dead in Serbia with a Kalashnikov, and he was then, despite being over age of 18, placed in a school where he chased around other students with a knife, threatened his foster family, and then got a flat by himself, and then kept bringing prostitutes back to it before stabbing to death an aspiring Marine in an argument over an e-scooter. Bringing our best and brightest in here, clearly. So, the asylum system is just a transmission vector for jihadist terrorists. And yet we're meant to pretend that these people are fleeing war, fleeing conflict, just want to work, just want a better life, and, in fact, are just as British as you and me. Because when I look at this man, Jihad Al-Shamie, who's just murdered a bunch of innocent Jews in Yom Kippur, I think he's just as British as you and me because he has the sufficient paperwork. See how this lie just won't persist? Eventually people will realise there are whole communities of people who harbour ethnic and religious grudges against, yes, the indigenous host majority of these lands, but also, in this instance, Jews because of scripture and long-standing Middle Eastern ethnic grievances, basically blood feuds over the territory, and we just don't need to import this. We don't need it here. It can all just go away because it was imported here via political choice, and it can be deported here via political choice. People in Prestwich told BBC Al-Shamie was a weightlifting enthusiast who rarely spoke to his neighbours. They said he would sometimes dress into Western clothes and other times traditional Syrian dress. His family have come out and denounced the attack. Of course, one must wonder why he was such a complete loner who seems to have been radicalised either online or in a local mosque. I'm sure we'll get answers about that soon. I had to record an update while exporting this video because it turns out that Mr. Jihad was released on bail under suspicion of rape. So he committed one of the most heinous crimes imaginable and then was let free to go and ruin and ultimately end more lives. And this is because apparently in Britain it is a greater crime to be a racist than it is to be a rapist or a rape enabler. And everyone involved in this morally inverted decision should lose their position. You have blood on your hands. This is the responsibility of the ruling woke morality of the blank slate that treats criminals as if they are the victims of society. No, this man did never belong in Britain in the first place, and neither does his family, because even though his family apparently condemned the terror attack, turns out that his father had praised October the 7th and Hamas on the day of the atrocious murders. So, the Telegraph have uncovered various social media posts by Faraj Al-Shamie. It's almost like nominative determinism is going crazy today. Jihad and Faraj. So he wrote on October the 7th, the scenes broadcast by the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, so the Al-Aqsa Mosque being in Jerusalem, so not Hamas murderers, Al-Aqsa Martyrs, of a group of fighters storming an occupation army camp, occupation being Jewish, with simple means, balloons and motorcycles, prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Israel will not remain. Men like these prove they are God's men on earth, and regardless of who leads them, this is the true compass for men confident of their victory, even if it means they are limited. As for you, the men of Levant, Jews, the wicked among you and the good among you will soon be made clear. Take good care of your weapons and aim them accurately at your brothers. And don't forget you disobeyed your Lord's command, so you did not hold together and you dispersed the bottom of the abyss. May God protect Palestine and its heroic people after the mass murder and rape and torture of thousands of Jews on October the 7th and abduction, of course, of many hostages. This guy celebrated it. So you wonder why his son went to a synagogue and rammed and stabbed to death 2 Jews and injured 4 more. This guy raised him. This guy was given asylum and citizenship by the Brits, 2006. Deport. Strip of his citizenship and deport him back to Syria immediately. Made other posts as well. Our brothers in Gaza, a second surprise the size of what you did on the 7th will follow. This was on the 11th of October. Followed by the first resounding fall of a great traitor in our region, Israel. Trust in God if you have what you have, for what comes after October the 7th is not like what came before it, and millions of hearts await the causes of the relief they will get from such a surprise. So celebrating terrorism in Israel, and therefore leading to terrorism in Britain. These people are our enemy. They cannot be assimilated or rehabilitated. They must just be deported, and that is the moderate option. What's most interesting is not only was the killer not known to the security services, according to Shabana Mahmood, our very impartial Home Secretary, who we'll be getting to shortly, but apparently Greater Manchester Police said they are working to understand the motivation behind the attack. I wonder what jihad meant by this attack on Jews on Yom Kippur. In October as well. 2 years after October 7th. I wonder what jihad meant by this. Maybe it's connected to this. About 2 weeks ago, ISIS officials, or self-proclaimed ISIS officials, because obviously it's a decentralized network after Trump bombed them out of their territory, called for Christians and Jews to die in shooting, stabbing, and ramming via car attacks. About 2 weeks ago. In a notice titled, O Zealous Monotheists, Abdul Hudhaifa al-Ansari wrote, Excerpts, O lions of Ireland, chase your prey, or Jews, Christians, and their allies in the streets and roads of precious America, Europe, and the world. Break into their homes, kill them and punish them by any means you can. Keep in mind that you are the hands of the Islamic State today, striking at the heart of the infidels and avenging Muslims in Palestine, Iraq, Syria, and all Muslim lands. Perfect the plans and diversify the operations. Blow up with explosives, burn with incendiary bombs, shoot with fatal bullets, cut and slaughter with sharp knives, run over and crush with buses. And the sincere will not lack a trick to bleed the hearts of Jews, Christians, and their allies, and heal the chest, misspelled, of a believing people from them. Cousin marriage isn't great on grammar, I suppose. Point being, whether or not this is just a proclamation to strike fear in the hearts of people, whether or not they're assailants and sleeper agents in our civilizations, 40,000 of which, by the way, are currently on MI5's terror watch list and have been for a great number of years, whether or not they have the capacity to do this, we should take this threat seriously, because some of the most febrile Muslim minds in our civilization clearly do take this with some authority, and it seems that this has built a climate where Mr. Jihad went out and killed a bunch of Jews on Yom Kippur. Perhaps this is also connected to the warnings that have been repeatedly ignored by the British government that I reported on recently from chatter from the intel community, from the likes of America, who have said, hey, we know of like 30,000 named jihadists, where they live and what they're doing in your country, and you could go round them up, wrap them up, and deport them right now, or at least arrest them and detain them and interrogate them and find out where they're from, what they're up to, and hopefully send them back. And the British government just goes, no thanks. And part of the reason why Israel is suggesting it will stop sharing intelligence with the British government is not just because Keir Starmer has recognised the state of Palestine along with Canada and Australia and France, I believe. It's because anytime they pick up the phone, there is a DEI-hired Muslim intel officer working in the IT and intelligence departments on the other end of it. So why would they share information about jihadist attacks that are imminent in the UK that puts both Jews and we Brits who have to live here at risk if it's just going to be passed into the hands of a potential sympathiser? Because the civil service has been utterly captured and riddled by jihadist sympathisers. William Shawcross, back in his review in 2023, said that Hizb ut-Tahrir, the now proscribed jihadist group that Keir Starmer represented while working at the Crown Prosecution Service, by the way, to prevent them being proscribed in about 2008 by the Conservative opposition, because he said they were an important voice in democracy that needed to be heard. William Shawcross said that they had been doing a long lobbying and infiltration campaign in various government departments, in the civil service, in the Met Police, including Mohammed Kosbar, of course, who himself was a member of the Muslim Council of Britain, who is still a member of Finsbury Park Mosque, who said, as a Met Police advisor, and was then sacked for it, that Hamas are the martyrs of the masters of resistance after October 7th. And by the way, yet again, if you're not particularly preoccupied with Israel and you're not Jewish, like me, these people are targeting us too. They blame Britain for establishing the state of Israel. We are infidels, we are Christians, we are white, and they hate white people, and so we are their next targets. We have already been their targets. Manchester Arena bombing, Reading stabbing, 2017 London Bridge attacks, there were multiple, the Westminster Bridge attack, the murder of drummer Lee Rigby, the 7/7 bombings. Like, there are multiple of these instances, and that's not even touching America and Europe. And they weren't Jews, they were us. So we do not need this here, but our government, as my contact has said, has repeatedly ignored the warnings about this. So this was on the anniversary of 7/7, I received this phone call, by the way, and my contact said that we had credible intelligence repeatedly handed to the British government, and they just ignored it, about an imminent jihadist attack that has been exacerbated by migration, particularly the asylum system, particularly the present channel crossers, who are smuggling guns, are smuggling drugs, and are smuggling actual ISIS fighters over into our country, and are just biding their time until they can do mass ramming and stabbing and arson attacks, like this attack in Manchester on Yom Kippur. But don't worry, the media says absolutely nothing to do with Islam. So this was before the bodies were even cold. This was when 2 of the deaths had just been announced. Sky News decided to roll out the "Don't Look Back in Anger" line early by saying this area of Manchester is tolerant, diverse, and peaceful. Muslims and Jews can live alongside each other, absolutely no problem whatsoever, and this terror attack does not represent Islam in the least.
Will have been so busy, and another man told me, which I've heard from a few people around here actually, that this area is a very tolerant area. It's a multicultural area. It's a place where Jewish people and Muslim community, there are large communities of both of those faiths in the area, have lived side by side for years, and they're understood to be very tolerant of one another, and he just could not believe that something like this would happen, and let alone here in a community where there are multiple different faiths living here in peace and tolerance. But yes, just confirming that news that we've had from Greater Manchester Police, that 2 members of the public are confirmed now. 2 have died from this attack at the synagogue here.
Oh yeah, 2 deaths, 4 potentially fatal injuries, we hope not, but we're waiting on announcements. Completely peaceful, completely tolerant. It's almost like the preconditions that you have created by importing these incompatible faiths and making them live alongside each other in what, as Kundi Drukpa has shown here using the ONS census data maps, it's kind of like a Middle Eastern PvP arena in the middle of Manchester. It's almost like building that bonfire is the precondition to it going up in flames. So it's insane to me. The idea that this neighbourhood is diverse and tolerant, and I don't agree that those things are virtues, by the way. I think diversity always means non-white, non-English, non-Christian, and I think actually all of those things are good, and they are the preconditions to a high-trust, homogenous, moral civilization, and so any decrease in that is a bad thing. But also, the idea that it is tolerant is not contradicted by the mass stabbing attack that just happened. The cognitive dissonance of these people, and the outright lying and propaganda, of course, is blatantly on display. And my conclusion here is we just shouldn't have this. We shouldn't have foreign enclaves existing in our country. Now, there is a difference between Jews and Muslims because the Jews are not going on mass stabbing attacks. Yes, there are lots of left-wing Jews who are promoting the migration policies that thereby lead to more Muslims coming into the country. Those left-wing Jews are, as the great Renu Camus once said, soaring off the branch upon which they sit, and they should change their minds very quickly. There are right-wing Jews. I got an email from a friend of mine this morning who I won't name, but who said, if the British people had taken care of their ethnic interests, then the Jews living here who like the British people would also be protected. And so, any Jews that are undermining that, bad idea. But the Jews themselves are not going around cutting off heads, stabbing people to death, and threatening to blow up synagogues and pop concerts. So, the primary problem in this country, and yes, I don't like Hinduism, yes, I think African Christianity does weird sacrifice rituals, and they're an economic problem, and I don't like the way that people shout into speakerphone on buses. All of these things are problems, right? And they're all problems we need to solve. However, the primary problem in Britain right now is Islam. It is Islam. That doesn't mean that we forget about all the other problems. They have to be solved too. But the primary existential threat, demographically, culturally, via terror attacks, via grooming gangs, it is Islam. All of these things are optional. All of these things were brought here via government policy. They can be rectified by government policy. And the policy is preceded by admitting that Islam does not belong in Britain. Bear that in mind. Yet again, speaking of the reaction by Muslims, Bushra Sheikh. Oh, she was horrified to learn of the attack outside a synagogue in Manchester. My thoughts are with those affected by this criminal act, not prayers, notably. We are yet to learn of the motivations behind this crime, but I blame Netanyahu and his live stream genocide. So, was the 7/7 attack because of Israel? Was the Manchester Arena attack because of Israel? Was the London Bridge attack because of Israel? Was the Westminster Bridge attack because of Israel? Were the grooming gangs because of Israel? Funnily enough, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there was mass predation on Jewish children by the grooming gangs. I think the Pakistanis in Manchester, Oldham, Rochdale, Rotherham were all targeting white English girls because they were kuffar and because they were easy meat and white slags and all of the other pejoratives, racial pejoratives they directed at the English. So this is just third world brained Jewsburging, yet again, by a woman who should not be in my country. And as pointed out by this account here, on the 7th of October, Palestinians have done more in 5 minutes than Zelensky has done with £75 billion. Humiliation is an understatement. Celebrating October 7th, the murders, the rapes, the tortures, all of which were live-streamed proudly by Hamas, and all of which they would like to do to us white Christians in Britain if given half the chance. Something the Bushra Sheikh, seemingly, would cheer on because she cheered on October 7th. This person should not be in my country. Again, Ammar Kazmi, good British name, Palestinian flag and bio. We're being told that today's attack in Manchester is a result of conflating all Jews with Israel, but many synagogues in Britain are openly Zionist and pro-Israel. You can oppose the violence in Manchester without sanitizing reality. Retranslation. You can oppose violence, but you can basically sympathize with the reasons that the terrorist did it. Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation is one such synagogue. Moreover, it's associated with Chabad Ludovich, a fiercely Zionist organization that materially supports Israel across its 5,000 branches dotted around the world. AKA, because we don't like Israel, these people deserved it. Now, this could be just a complete fringe weirdo, right? As my friend Drew Pavlou points out, this guy used to work for Jeremy Corbyn in Parliament. Communication strategies. These people are working in Parliament. Parliamentary campaign organiser for Momentum. Leadership campaign organiser, Jeremy Corbyn. He's no doubt got his CV submitted to Jezbollah, or your party, or the Islamic Boys Club, whatever Jeremy Corbyn's alliance with the 4 Islamists elected on a pro-Gaza ticket last year is going to be called. These people are in our politics. These people have power. These people shouldn't be here. This should be it. This should be the catalyst. It should have been long ago. There are so many reasons. There are so many corpses that should attest to why Islam should not be in this country. But this should be it. It is time to push. It is time to be honest. It is time to be frank. It is time to be unapologetic. Also, the Muslim Council of Britain responded. So the Daily Mail ran this front page saying he was an Islamic terrorist. Again, the name Jihad kind of gives it away. And the Muslim Council of Britain, and you may be going, well, that's the Centre for Media Monitoring. Same thing. Centre for Media Monitoring is their front group. The Muslim Council of Britain says, a disgraceful front page from the Daily Mail, the action of this terrorist is anti-Islamic. Is it now? So here's a full list of what I could find of why we should ban the Muslim Council of Britain. I'm just going to rattle off a few examples here. Bear in mind, they seem to, via their charitable foundation, get funding from the Department for Work and Pensions. They have an in with many politicians, despite having a long-standing engagement ban with Whitehall. And this is the kind of stuff that they've done. The Centre for Media Monitoring and the Muslim Council of Britain has told newspapers and broadcasters not to call Jihadi John a terrorist, not to describe Hamas as Islamists, and said, quote, terror attacks cannot and should not be described as unqualified acts of jihad, given they breach the rules of jihad. Don't worry, we'll go on to the meaning of jihad later. The Muslim Council of Britain and the Centre for Media Monitoring describes Islam as, or Islamism, rather, as an example of a neutral understanding of the term may be peaceful, democratic, constitutional, and moderate political activism based on Muslim ideology. They say Islamism is peaceful, democratic, constitutional, moderate, based on Muslim ideology. These people are just insidious subversives that want to turn us into a caliphate. They should be stripped of their charitable status, they should be investigated, their members should be prescribed, and either imprisoned or deported. That is a sensible way to deal with this. The alternative is more terror attacks that cost more innocent lives, and I'm not having that. The Centre for Media Monitoring recommends the avoidance of the term as a descriptor altogether, Islamism, and tells journalists not to use Islamic extremism in news output, as it is not a neutral term, but one that makes a direct link between Islam, the religion, and the ideology of extremism. It implies that the Muslimness of the individual is relevant. Oh, it is. There is no such thing as a moderate Muslim. There is just a Muslim who has not read the Quran and Hadiths too closely, who has not emulated the life of the Prophet Muhammad most accurately. The Salafists are just honest. Otherwise, if you're trying to split hairs between moderate Muslims and the jihadists, the Islamists, the extremists, you have to ask the question, was Muhammad himself an Islamist? And then that question, on its face, is so absurd that you have to realize that the seed of extremism lies within the fertile soil of Islamic scripture. And that means that, number one, Islam can reliably produce terror attacks, and of course, number two, even if it was wholly peaceful, if you input Islam into Britain, you do not get Britain at the other end of it. You get Pakistan, Iran, Syria, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Lebanon. Now, some of those countries are functional, some of them are third world hellholes. In either respect, I don't want to live in any of them. I want to live in Britain, my ancestral homeland, my Christian kingdom. Thank you very much. We were never asked, we always voted against this, and yet, people like this, Muslim Council of Britain, the Centre for Media Monitoring, Shabana Mahmood, who we'll be getting onto later, are given undue political purchase in our country to soft pedal Islam and outright jihad with government funding. All of it has to evaporate. These people have to be stripped of their titles, removed from government positions, and either encouraged to return to their countries of origin or sent back if they have committed direct and provable crimes, many of which they have. Even more, the Centre for Media Monitoring's founder and lead strategist is Miqad Versi, who is also a Muslim Council of Britain spokesperson, and attended the Labour Muslim Network's official iftar in March 2025. Despite them, again, since 2009, having a government engagement ban, thanks for one of their deputy former leaders signing the Istanbul Declaration, which was interpreted as calling to fire on British Navy vessels. The Centre for Media Monitoring's Amanda Morris, one of their co-conspirators, previously for the Islamic activist group MEND, served as its as its national head of women's engagement and chair of MEND's Cardiff working group. In 2020, Morris said she wished there were a law against mocking Islam, so a blasphemy law, and referred to the Charlie Hebdo cartoons of Muhammad, saying, "I don't think that's just purely criticism, I think that could be considered an incitement." Basically, by drawing Muhammad, they deserve to be murdered, massacred by Islamic terrorists. These people are the ones trying to convince the newspapers not to say, this was a jihadist attack, this was an Islamist, this was Muslim terrorism. And they have purchased, by the way, because they have held meetings with ITN, so ITV, STV, News UK, so The Times, The Sun, The Sunday Times, Channel 4, ITN, Sky, LBC, The Guardian, The Mail, The Mirror, the BBC, and delivered masterclasses at Middlesex City, Leeds Trinity, and Goldsmiths University to tell them how to cover Islam and Muslims in the press. They also boast about being instrumental in developing Ipso's guidance on the reporting of Muslims and Islam. So anytime a Muslim puts in a complaint about newspaper coverage about Islam, or the newspapers think, well, I need to be Ipso compliant and I don't want to be fined, so I need to shape the narrative in a certain way, it is being set by the Muslim Council of Britain, the Centre for Media Monitoring, who think that the very phrase jihad or Islamist is not applicable to Islamic terror committed by a guy called Jihad. These people are not fit to be in my country. They are dangerous, they are subversive, they should be made to leave. So let's look at the Green Party's response. This is Zach Polanski, of course. I believe he is of Jewish and Eastern European descent, so fair enough, I think he probably is actually deeply affected by this. He's saying, we've seen rising anti-Semitism for years as well as rising hate crime more generally. By who, Zach? Is there a massive spate of white guys going around beating up Jews? Or is it, as has been pointed out by Basil the Great here, is it more likely your deputy leader and his co-belligerents saying, this is for Gaza, Allahu Akbar, with a Palestinian flag upon winning his council election, who created this climate of violence against Jews and white Brits and Christians? Cognitive dissonance. They're going to continue to import people who cause this problem. Tim Farron, former leader of the Liberal Democrats, says, after the outrage in Manchester, just outrage, people just mad. Some people did something, in the words of Ilhan Omar. There are people on the streets tonight chanting for the annihilation of the world's only Jewish state. We'll get to that, don't worry. Racism is a feature of the far right, but sadly not of the far right alone. Shameful. Oh yes, it's the far right's fault. Show me on the doll where the far right, Tommy Robinson, hurt you, Mr. Farron. Because total phantom. See how they have to reaffirm the narrative even when their client groups defy it. They have to insist that the blank slate is true, that by noticing differences, you are causing discord, terrorism, preventing integration. It's like, yeah, so the far right just means those who notice differences between groups. And yes, I do notice which group is committing terror attacks, which group wants to subsume my country in a Islamic theocratic dictatorship, and which group is not doing that. Which groups are not doing that, funnily enough. I noticed that there are many groups who are not committing violence on Britain's streets, namely the white British and, yes, Jews. And who is? Muslims. Why? Islam. And so your attempt to crowbar in your political pet project here, which is anti-racism, blank slatism, is reprehensible. And that's why this is a total statement of moral cowardice. An update again from while exporting. David Lammy and Shabana Mahmood and Andy Burnham addressed crowds in Manchester at a visual outside the synagogue. David Lammy was booed. David Lammy is Deputy Prime Minister and the Justice Minister. Shabana Mahmood was standing right behind him. And seems like the Jewish people in Manchester are looking back in anger.
Therefore, I have great pleasure in introducing our Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy. And before I do, please, we know how we all feel. We know how we all feel.
Go to Palestine! Shame on you! Shame on you! Go to Palestine! Leave us alone!
This continued for a few minutes, and also after he had finished speaking. Completely correct. By acknowledging a Palestinian state, they rewarded terrorism, but more importantly, by importing these people here in the first place, you brought dangerous jihadists, literally named jihad, into our midst, making Jews just as much the target as white Brits. And we have had, time and time again, our versions of October the 7th, the grooming gangs, Manchester Arena, Westminster Bridge, London Bridge, Sir David Amos's murder. It just goes on and on and on. So David Lammy then tweeted, "I heard the pain, anger and grief at today's vigil after the horrific terrorist attack. We stand with the Jewish community in grief and solidarity against anti-Semitism. We are surging security at synagogues and supporting victims. Why do you need the security at synagogues? David, is it the far right? No, it's Islam. You don't stand with the Jewish community, you don't stand with the indigenous Brits that you seem to have some racial grievance against, because you keep importing, against their expressed wishes, Muslim terrorists into the country. We never wanted it. We don't want them here. This was all preventable. This is all a consequence of the policies that you've always supported, David. We're looking back in anger, we won't be gaslit, and we want them gone." Also, the Home Office. A few hours before the attack. "Wishing the Jewish community in the UK and beyond a blessed Yom Kippur." Now, I wanted to remind everyone, there is a Home Office Islamic network with 700 members who are currently working overtime to spin this narrative to yet again go out and say, don't look back in anger. Because they don't want to blame Islam for anything. Remember, they said cultural nationalism is a right-wing extremist terrorist ideology, but under their definition of Islamism, they said that Islam should not be implicated in terror attacks by Islamists. So, even though it's in the name, Islam is not to blame or has any association with Islamism, but if you read Douglas Murray or George Orwell, you are a far-right racist and should be put on Prevent's watch list. These are the people that are doing that. And you wonder why we keep getting Islamic terror attacks and credible intel being ignored by the security services that then leads to more Islamic terror attacks. Then there's Shabana Mahmood. She came out and gave a very solemn statement with her eyebrows that make her look like the villain from Elmo's Adventures in Grouchland. And I just responded, we don't actually believe it when she says, "I am horrified by the anti-Semitic terrorist attack at a synagogue on the holiest day in our Jewish calendar. The government has stepped up security at synagogues across the whole of the country, and we will do whatever is required to keep our Jewish community safe." Why do synagogues need security, Shabana? Is it possibly because of the Sunni Muslim faith that you said is the most important thing in your life? Are there perhaps some tensions between Jews, Christians, and Muslims based on some scriptures that you might be able to cite? For example, Surah 551, "Take neither Jews nor Christians as friends," or Sahih al-Bukhari 29:26, which prophesies that the end days will only come when the rocks and the trees come alive with the spirit of Allah and say, "There is a Jew behind me, come and kill him," other than Garkad, who's the one Jewish tree who won't snitch on the Jews. Is it perhaps the fact that you attended a global intifada march where she was supporting the cause of Palestinian liberation?
I'm just here, it's Saturday afternoon, a peaceful protest outside of a Sainsbury's store here in central Birmingham, and it's 3:30 and the store has actually just shut as a result of the peaceful protest. That's about 4.5 hours worth of business that Sainsbury's is losing for supporting goods from the Israeli settlements which are illegal under international law. So they're calling on Sainsbury's and all other stores that trade settlement goods that they stop from doing so, that they do not support people who have broken international law. There's a huge response today just here in central Birmingham.
That's quite enough of that. Yet again, this woman is our Home Secretary. This woman is in charge of counter-terror, is in charge of appointing the person supervising the nationally backed statutory inquiry into the grooming gangs. This woman has supported an Islamophobia definition that says the very mention of the grooming gangs being Pakistani Muslim in composition is itself racist. This is a woman who has been on multiple pro-Palestine and Intifada march. Globalize the Intifada, by the way, so that implicates Britain. Again, if you don't care about Israel, she wants it here too. And now this is the person we're meant to expect is completely ignorant of the reasons to why a man named Jihad went into a synagogue and stabbed a bunch of people. She said, on GB News, the only person responsible for this attack is the attacker himself. What a stupid and irresponsible thing to say. The investigation hasn't even been carried out yet. She admits that she doesn't know whether or not there is a wider terror network at play here. And it almost is like she's saying that there is no ideological foundation for the man named Jihad stabbing Jews. Or any of the other Islamic terror attacks that have been committed. You know what? She's also completely shocked as well that there is someone called Jihad. Apparently as a Muslim, she's never met anyone called Jihad.
Attacker has been named as Jihad Al-Shamie. That obviously has been translated to struggle of the Syrian. What do the authorities take from that name?
Oh, well, I mean, I was very surprised to discover that name myself. Actually, as a Muslim, I've never heard someone being called Jihad, but it is the name that he was born with. That has always been his name. He was not
that's not to use it. That's not a nom de guerre, as they would say in France. That is what the man has always been as a child who grew up with this name to become the adult that took the attack. Is that right?
It is my understanding that is the name he was born with. It is not a name that was adopted later in life.
So, first of all, total lie. Total lie. The idea you've never met anyone called Jihad, try going to Scotland, where now it's a name that has entered common circulation. Purely organic, of course. Hadrian's Walls just needs to get 10 feet higher, frankly. No, Scotland, like the rest of Britain, needs to be liberated from Islam. This name would not be in circulation if not for mass migration. These terror attacks would not happen if not for Muslim migration. It should stop. It should be reversed. So, Shabana Mahmood is just playing dumb, right? Whether or not it's Turkiya, I don't know. But she is playing dumb. She is defending her co-ethnics. She is defending her religion from warranted criticism. I mean, the word Islamophobia itself was invented by the Muslim Brotherhood to try to copy the gay rights movement and to copy the movements against anti-Semitism following the Holocaust. This is documented by Dr. Giles Keppel and then corroborated by a former jihadist who was actually at one of the meetings with one of the Muslim Brotherhood's front groups where they concocted this scheme. But what's curious is that Shabana Mahmood is saying that she's never met someone named Jihad. Okay. Why? What's wrong with being named Jihad, Shabana? Doesn't it just translate to internal spiritual struggle? Doesn't it just mean a personal relationship with yourself and God? No. She knows it doesn't. We know it doesn't. Because abrogation, which is the process by which verses in the Quran are chronologically ordered, because the Quran itself and its surahs, its verses, chapters, are ordered according to length rather than chronology, because despite being apparently the inerrant word of Allah as revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, written eternally on a stone in heaven, which would then mean that literally every action anyone ever does is predetermined because, of course, there are quotes from Jesus and Abraham in the Quran, which would then mean that everything we've ever said is predetermined and eternal up in heaven. But anyway, look, the Quran itself was incomplete upon Muhammad's death. It was written on bits of parchment and rock and put together by his successor, the first caliph, and his father-in-law, who gave him, Muhammad, his 6-year-old daughter, Aisha, to marry, and then consummated the marriage when he was 9. Because the verses are in order of length and not in chronology, this causes some confusion and contradiction in the apparently inerrant word of Allah that then the ulama have to sort through and put in order of Muhammad's life and biography. And so that means that the sword verses, the verses that tell Muslims to fight those who don't believe in Allah, to kill the polytheists, to slay the mushrikun, to not befriend Christians and Jews, they supersede the earlier verses where jihad just means internal strife, peace, a resistance against fitna, temptation and immorality. And this is why the root word of jihad appears most commonly in conjunction with violence or reference to fighters, the mujahideen. And this is why, of course, as well, one of the caliphs, Ibn al-Mubarak, compiled an entire book of hadiths following his war with the Romans, dedicated to jihad. And he said, "The monasticism of my community is jihad." And he was known for fighting many wars. So jihad means war. Jihad means war against the kafir, the unbelievers, the polytheists, Jews, Christians, until they submit and either pay the jizya, a tax that makes them second-class citizens in their own lands, or they are killed. Their necks are struck at in the name of Allah. And by the way, the jizya was only inflicted on Jews because Muhammad migrated from Mecca to Medina. It's called the Hijra. It's what makes emigration, so moving elsewhere to evangelize either by word or sword, Islam. It makes it a unspoken sixth pillar, a duty for Muslims, hence the amount of migration we've been getting. When Muhammad went to Medina, there were settled Jewish tribes already there and some Arab Christians dotted around Greater Syria at the time. And Muhammad tried to make the case that he was the next in the long line of prophets from Noah and Abraham and Jesus Christ, even though he denied the incarnation, denied the resurrection, and demanded the destruction of all Christian icons except some of the images of the Christ as a child and the Virgin Mary. And the Jewish tribe said, "Yeah, no thanks, we don't believe you. We don't believe the 7th century caravan robber warlord who thinks that we worship Ezra as the son of God because he's so gullible that his own followers call him the ear because he believes whatever the last person said." So that Muhammad got a bit resentful about those Jewish tribes, especially considering they were quite successful at the time with irrigation and ingenuity, and so they dominated the markets in both Mecca and Medina. And so he decided to wage war against those Jewish tribes and the Christians and subject them to either forced conversion, the jizya, or death, mass execution. And so the idea that a man named Jihad might have problems with Jews makes sense. Also, the idea, and this is a problem particularly in Manchester, the idea that this guy worked purely alone, not so sure about that. So Ed Hussein's book Among the Mosques, Ed went to Manchester as part of his whistle-stop tour of the various mosques and madrasas and Muslim communities in Britain in 2021. And he wrote, he had a meeting in Manchester Piccadilly Station in a Starbucks with Mahfouz Alimain. This may be a pseudonym because Ed did have to use pseudonyms for some of his conversations because, well, some of the Muslims speaking honestly about the issues in their own community might face violent reprisal, just like Jews in Manchester do from men named Jihad. And he spoke to Aliman, who is a senior official at Manchester Council, on a board member of a mosque here in Manchester. And he says, "Didsbury is a wealthy area here in Manchester. The mosque management reported Salman Abedi, the suicide bomber from the Manchester Arena attack, to the authorities 6 times for the concert bombing. We didn't know how to act and had no real follow-up. We get tip-offs like this all the time, but this was one that my colleague should have taken seriously." And he says, "These guys who come from war zones are not like us, not like all these peaceful people." And when Ed asks, "What do you mean?" he says, "Syrians and Libyans, Yemenis and Palestinians who come to British mosques have seen bombs and destruction daily. Killings are normal for them. The Arab Spring went horribly wrong. They find it hard to adjust here in Manchester. We diagnose PTSD in our soldiers who've been in war zones and we fight on behalf of governments. These refugees and others in our mosques have come from war-torn countries, often fighting against their own governments, killing soldiers, killing other citizens. Peace in Manchester troubles them. They feel the need to seek revenge and justice for the wrongs done to them in their countries. We see it in their ways, in the mosques, and their constant agitation against stability at every level. If the Imam speaks in his sermon about peace, an Arab asylum seeker will accuse him of selling out and not opposing the dictators in the Arab world. But that is not our fight. They don't understand Britain is different. We don't have to attack the Arab leaders in every sermon. Our younger generation encourages instability and trouble. I am always being stopped at the mosque by younger Muslims born and raised in this country who are opposed to Israel. When I meet with Jewish leaders, the younger Muslims complain about us normalizing Zionism. The elders understand the need to work with everyone, while the complaints of the younger ones then draw the attention of the war-torn Arab newcomers. Younger Muslims in the mosques make common cause with the refugees in a way that the elders feel is unnecessary. There is a worrying division in our congregations. So, this Muslim elder in Manchester Council who goes to mosque says not only are the refugees and children of refugees more likely to be violent, more likely to prioritise foreign conflicts over the interests of Britain, but then younger, second-generation British-born Muslims are amplifying their ethno-religious agitation, their issues with Jews and Christians, and are condemning even the softer-hearted imams preaching coexistence, the likelihood of which seems doubtful to me, and they are saying, no, we need to fight the Jews and the Christians. And this is very evident by the Henry Jackson Society polling that took place last year in October, which said that 3/4 of Muslims living in Britain think that Hamas did nothing wrong on October 7th, 52% want to criminalise depictions of their prophet Muhammad, a third want Sharia law and Islam to become the official religion of Britain. And this is most prominent among second-generation, British-born, university-educated Muslims aged 18 to 30. So it is an intergenerational problem. Assimilation is not happening. Bringing in any refugees from the Muslim world, refugees, is an existential security risk because they keep committing terror attacks. This all has to be stopped. This all has to be reversed. Plain and simple. It's the only solution. Now, let's be fair. Okay? Let's be fair. Perhaps this is not a feature of Islam itself. Because this is according to Humza Yousaf, former First Minister of Scotland, whose career went about as well as his attempt to ride an e-scooter down a hallway. And he said, this evil terrorist may claim to have been a Muslim, but his actions have nothing to do with Islam, a religion that says to kill one innocent person is like killing the whole of humanity. Over the coming weeks and months, many will try to divide us. We must not let them prevail. We've heard similar stuff out of the Met Police just after October 7th, when one of the Met Police's Muslim advisors, presumably a proper scriptural scholar, an imam within the Met Police, said, "The word jihad has a number of meanings, but we know the public will most commonly associate it with terrorism. We have specialist counter-terrorism officers here in the operations room who have particular knowledge in this area." I think they probably associate it with terrorism because guys named Jihad keep killing Jews in Britain. That's a bit of a problem. But perhaps this is completely disconnected from Islam. Perhaps I'm being unfair. Perhaps reading from the Quran is unfair. Perhaps the Islamists that cite Quran verses are being unfair. And perhaps this completely disproportionate representation of Muslims among terrorists is unwarranted. Now, this particular report here by Andrew Gilligan and Dr. Paul Stott for Policy Exchange went through the numbers of how many terror attacks, terror suspects, convicted terrorists have been Muslim versus far right. Despite making up just 7% of the official UK population, Muslims are responsible for 94% of all deaths and 88% of injuries caused by terrorism since 1999, and comprise 80% of counter-terror police and 75% of MI5's open caseload and 63% of terrorists in custody. 70%, 94%, 88%, 80%, 75%, 63%. And that's without going through the grooming gang perpetrator data. That is actually pretty similar numbers. Pakistani men are about upwards of 64% of suspects in these cases, despite making up about, 2% of Britain's population total? So, can Islam coexist with Jews and Christians? Let's look to its scriptural sources to see this, because Islam is often conflated with the Abrahamic religions, mainly because Muhammad himself parasitized the prophets and credible figures from the Bible to try to convince Jews and Arab Christians at the time to either convert, submit, or die. And I would say that he's counterfeited their legitimacy here. So, complete disrespect is shown to Christianity, by the way, not just the denial of the incarnation of Christ, not just with the idea, based on contortions and certain translations and sermons by imams, that Jesus didn't actually die and was taken up to heaven and replaced by a doppelganger, and so the entire crucifixion was a kind of work of con artistry to, for some reason, fool people into becoming Christians and take up the false gospel before Allah was ready to reveal the Quran to Muhammad a few centuries later. Don't know why Allah decided to delay that revelation. Not explained, but there you go. If he's in charge of everything, it doesn't really make sense. But what does the Quran say specifically about Jews and Christians? O believers, and this is Al-Ma'idah, verse 51. O believers, take neither Jews nor Christians as guardians, they are guardians of each other. Whoever does so will be counted as one of them. Surely Allah does not guide the wrongdoing people. So not only are, according to this verse, the Torah and the Gospels, so the Bible, a false revelation, which makes you wonder why Allah had his previous prophets, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, reveal those to people at the time, but also Jews and Christians should not be befriended. They are not your allies, they're not your co-belligerents, you cannot exist alongside them, they must be forced to be Muslims. In the Quran. Okay, so if you're saying that Mr. Jihad, who went and stabbed a bunch of if you're saying if Mr. Jihad, who went and stabbed a bunch of Jews, is completely ignorant of the Quran and has nothing to do with Islam, you can't explain this verse. Or Hamza, or Shabana, you're being dishonest because you want to protect Islam from criticism when you know this is actually the goal of the religion, according to Muhammad, who's apparently just regurgitating the infallible word of Allah, and who lived a life without sin and is therefore the perfect man to be emulated. And then, again, in Al-Baqarah 191, it says, kill them wherever you come upon them and drive them out of the places from which they have driven you out. And it's referring to polytheists here, non-Muslims. For persecution is far worse than killing. And do not fight them at the sacred mosque unless they attack you there. If they do so, then fight them. That is the reward of the disbelievers. So on holy territory, don't proactively go out and slay the unbelievers, the kafir, but anywhere else except the mosque, go for it. Make them submit to the sword. Again, in the Quran, not some obscure hadith that has been discredited or disputed by the Muslim scholars. And then there's Surah At-Tawbah, this is verse 29, fight those who do not believe in Allah and the last day, nor comply with what Allah and his messenger have forbidden, nor embrace the religion of truth from among those who are given the scripture until they pay the tax, the jizya, willingly, submitting, fully humbled. Then there's Surah 47:4 that says, when you meet the disbelievers in battle, strike their necks until you have thoroughly subdued them and bind them firmly. Later, free them either as an act of grace or by ransom, until the war comes to an end. So it will be. Had Allah willed, he himself could have inflicted punishment on them, but he does this only to test some of you by means of others, and those who are martyred in the cause of Allah, he will never render their deeds void, which explains why so many Muslims have been praising Hamas. And of course, then there's Surah 8:12 as well that echoes this. Remember, O Prophet, when your Lord revealed to the angels, I am with you, so make the believers stand firm, I will cast horror into the hearts of disbelievers, so strike their necks and strike their fingertips. So stab them, cut their hands and heads off, and commit acts of terror, in the name of Allah and Islam. Muslim terrorism comes directly from the Quran and Hadiths. And then there's the infamous Sahih al-Bukhari 2926 I referenced earlier, which is included in the Hamas Charter, by the way. And it says, and this is the words of the Prophet Muhammad according to the Hadiths, the hour will not be established until you fight with the Jews, and the stone behind which a Jew will be hiding will say, O Muslim, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him. Also, other Muslim resentment of Jews not just stems from the Hijra, Mecca to Medina, and not just stems with the various wars like the fighting of the Quraysh tribes at the Battle of Khandaq, where Muhammad ordered all the male captives to be beheaded and the women and children to be enslaved, but also when Muhammad besieged Khaybar, massacred its Jewish inhabitants. He then took the widowed Zainab, his first cousin, which is why first cousin marriage is permitted in Islam, also just the mapping onto the sort of Biradiri and Arab tribal networks that were already practicing sibling and first cousin marriage, hence why it remains at very high rates today, and in places like Bradford, which are glorified Pakistani enclaves in our country. Muhammad took his first cousin, Zainab, as his seventh wife, Zainab herself being a Jewish woman who lost her husband and her brother. She then fed poisoned lamb to Muhammad and his followers, resulting in one of their deaths, and the wound she inflicted on Muhammad is blamed for his death later on, and she herself was executed. So Muslims believe that basically Jews, as a collective, are responsible for the death of Muhammad. They shouldn't be befriended. Judgment Day will only come when the Jews are fought and killed, and it inspires Allah to possess inanimate objects to announce where they're hiding so that Muslims can root them out even faster. And Muslims cannot live alongside Christians and Jews in that interim period unless they fight them, kill them, or force them to be subjected to the jizya and live as second-class citizens in their own lands. And this is repeated throughout multiple hadiths, by the way, so it's not just this one-off that can be dismissed, and this is also in the authoritative hadith collections. It's not one of those that were jettisoned of the absolute thousands that were combed through by early ulama jurists. So this is the source of inspiration for Mr. Jihad, who seems to have gone and stabbed a bunch of Jews on Yom Kippur based on his sincere Islamic convictions. So don't let the media and politicians gaslight you yet again into not looking back in anger and not blaming Islam for yet another Muslim terror attack inspired directly by Muslim scripture. If you want to learn more about this, I just did an interview with Steven Edginton on GB News about the problems with Islam and why it is incompatible with Britain, which seems to have done very well preceding this event. And the fact that this is just an organic phenomena, a sincerely held and indigestible conviction among Muslim enclaves in our country, is why immediately after the terror attack, there was a pro-Palestinian chimp out directly outside Downing Street. What are they looking for? The government's already recognised the state of Palestine. What more do they want? Is this political pressure, or is this a celebration? They were fighting with police. We don't care about the Jewish community, says one campaigner, just 2 hours after people were killed in Manchester. And so Keir Starmer's insistence that this will never happen again, that this is an atrocity, just rings hollow. Despite his own wife and kids being Jewish, despite him and Yvette Cooper going down to a synagogue to mourn with the Jewish community in Britain, this just rings hollow. Because what they're going to do is they can continue to promote people like Shabana Mahmood into positions of influence over counterterrorism and immigration policy and the grooming gangs. They're going to continue Muslim migration from the Third World. They are going to continue pursuing an Islamophobia law, which makes it impossible for me to explain to you the scriptural roots of Islamic terror, as I just did. They are going to continue to ratchet towards an Islamic state in Britain. And they're going to do this via immigration policy. Because this, an excellent tweet here, this is the usual routine. Refugees welcome, and then eventually a refugee goes out and murders a bunch of innocent people. And because they're cognitive dissonant, or because of their ideological insistence on a blank slate utopia, they will never reverse course. They will never climb down from this perch. They will never stop the policies that are getting people killed. They will never stop providing demographic fodder to terror attacks, grooming gangs, and an Islamic takeover of Britain's political system. And so the only solution is, first of all, we be bold, honest, and frank about the Islamic scripture that repeatedly inspires terror attacks. We say, it's not Islamism, it's not jihadism, it's not extremism, it's Islam. That Islam does not belong in Britain. Islam cannot build Britain, it cannot reproduce Britain, it is not interested in recreating the country of Britain. This Christian, English and Celtic kingdom that has lasted for thousands of years and has been the shining jewel internationally. This rainy little isle that managed to conquer, administrate, and upgrade most of the world to where the sun never set on its empire. We should not be subsumed in a caliphate. And what that requires is then policy and action. We should be banning halal, we should be banning face coverings, we should be depriving all Muslim charities, mosques and madrasas of public funding. They should be closed. And if you want to worship Islam in this country, you should not be able to. You should either leave or renounce your faith. And if you do renounce your faith, you should be monitored to ensure that you are authentic in your renunciation. There are plenty of Muslim countries for you to go to. I am not keen on you taking over mine. I am not keen on more dead bodies. I'm not keen on more abused children. I'm not keen on more mass stabbing attacks, whether it's Jews, whether it's Christians, whether it's English people. It has to stop now. And the media are still lying to you. This time, don't look back in anger must not work. It's time we look back soberly, but with righteous fury, and we have to ensure this doesn't happen again.